I missed the intro video. Okay, well, we're here anyways. Wrong button in Restream. Good morning, Dr. Eleanor.
Good morning. Good afternoon for me.
Actually, you're right. It's afternoon for me as well. So we've already had a little chat here. We're just checking in. But yeah, we generally start these conversations with a little update of what's going on in your world and what you're working on. So do you want to, what happened? Actually, and we also haven't gone live in, I think, 3 weeks because we had a nice chat last week that was very helpful, but that was all for me, and I appreciate it.
I'm starting a 5-day experience, step over the threshold to a new way of being. And we have a very nice group starting. And it's to give people an experience of themselves in the four worlds. And to start out with the spiritual, then go to the physical, emotional, mental, and integrated. And I've designed it so it's going to take maybe a half hour of your time a day. It's free. And each day you'll get a practice in that world for self-reflection and growth and expansion. And at the end of the 5 days, you get the integrated worlds. And I'm going to do a Zoom on Monday, Wednesday, and the following Monday. And there'll be a prize for people who answer the questions every day. So if you're doing it and you go on Facebook group, the private Facebook group, and answer the question of the day, then every day there's a new prize. Oh. And the grand prize for somebody who's answered the questions every day is a full hour reading with me.
Oh, wow.
So that's the 5-day experience next week. And I'm going to be starting to teach 2 classes, maybe 3. I have 1 class on the 4 worlds with the Noble Energy Map as a secondary. And that is going to meet every week starting the 27th of August, which is a Tuesday from 1 to 3. And on Wednesday, the Human Design Practitioner Group, with the addition of the 4 worlds, is going to meet on every Wednesday, 1 to 3. And currently, I'm limiting the groups to 10 to 12 people because I want to know who my people are. And the Human Design Practitioner Group has 13 people. So I think we have to close it. And if there are a lot more people, then we will start another group. I would rather teach another class than compromise the integrity of the classes I have.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Why, I never actually asked you, what gave you the name Step Over the Threshold? Like what is the threshold in this case?
The threshold is the levels of consciousness. So you're stepping over the threshold of feeling like you're limited to the real world, the waking world, the mental world, the world you have to behave in and be accepted in and have control in if you want to get ahead. So I'm opening up that threshold and saying, step over your limitation and find a new sense of yourself. And it's an integrated self that doesn't just live in one world. I just did a Zoom call with some of the people who signed up. And we got permission to post it. So it will be posted, I believe, on the Facebook group, so that it will remain, and in the course material. So it will remain private to the people in the group. But I went over why I designed the program I designed the way I designed it, and what the worlds are, and what some of the obstacles and challenges are to really integrating them.
Cool. The 2 courses, I'm going to attend one of them. And the question I actually asked you yesterday while I was on my walk and we were chatting, and I don't think we got to the answer, but part of me wants to not attend the HD practitioner one, because if I want to work with this work, maybe I want a baseline from just the pure, for noble energy maps versus.
Well, the advantage of being in the practitioner course, because you understand the body map.
Mhm.
You know what a center is, and you know what the gates are, and you have some experience with what the centers do from a traditional standpoint. The advantage of that is that within 3 or 4 months, you will be able to look at your family, for example, and friends, and understand that the energy between the noble energy maps is showing you how the energy moves between the worlds. And it's the structure you need. It's like when you learn to read, you have an alphabet.
Mhm.
And when you put the letters together, it forms a word and you know what it is. In the integrated noble energy map, when something comes from one world and joins up with another channel from another world, it has a meaning. And the more you understand the worlds, the more empowered you are to give those channels the meaning that they have for you.
Right. Empowerment is a big word here, and lends perfectly into kind of our spirited conversation earlier. Okay, so I'm definitely going to come to the practitioner course. I mean, that made most sense, but part of me almost wanted to come in green.
You're not going to lose anything. The curriculum of both are basically going to cover the same material.
Mm-hmm.
But the having the language of the body map can accelerate your understanding of the 4 worlds.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have a matrix, and usually I don't show the full charts, but the full charts, I think I sent you a copy at one point, where all of the composites are laid out in all of the worlds.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see, for example, how while you may be influenced by the mental world, when the timing of your emotional matrix is different, it can inform you on the flow of conscious and unconscious energy in your energetic aura.
Mm-hmm.
And the channel book begins to get into that. And it's very nuanced.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I'd go to one of what the channels I wrote, and I think, did I make enough differentiation between these?
Mm-hmm.
Because you're taking each world and you're putting them together, and the way they come together is different than each one would separately.
Right. Yeah, no, I have the original. It's overwhelming how many charts there are at first, so it's better to simplify. The other thing you just said, and this is where I want to go for sure, is language and terminology. So, influenced is a much better word than conditioned. Conditioned feels like a label. It feels like it's something I need to.
Can I tell you about conditioning?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. From a psychological standpoint, we all have heard of Pavlov's dog. Yes?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That was a classical conditioning experiment. Every time something happened, something else happened.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, church bells. When you hear church bells, depending on the time of day, you know something's happening. Or like over the last few days, we've had storms in Charleston. And so over the last 3 days, several times a day, my emergency alert signal on my phone would start beeping
Mm.
to tell me that there was flooding in my neighborhood. When I'd hear that alert go off, I'd definitely look at my phone.
Mhm.
That's a conditioned response.
Mhm.
Every time something happens, something else happens. And if it reaches a point like with Pavlov's dog, where every time the bell was rung, he salivated, it shows that our physiological responses are responding to things in our environment that we may not even realize are causing us to react as we do.
Mhm.
In the advertising field, they realized that there's not just classical conditioning, but there's also intermittent conditioning, which is a kind of reinforcement pattern where you want somebody to do something and you begin to elicit physical responses to stimuli that they don't even know they're responding to. And so conditioning can be used for good or it can be used for bad. In dog training, for example, the old-fashioned training, when you would take a dog's nose and stick it in their pee, was negative conditioning. Every time they pee or poop, you'd punish them.
Mhm.
And they would learn to avoid the punishment.
Right.
A whole new form of conditioning came in when the psychologists discovered that rewards conditioned people better than punishment. So they began to use subtle rewarding, good feeling kind of things, or imagery that would make somebody feel good. Like I think of the old cigarette ads with the cowboys and, or beer ads to make a man, there was suggestions in the information that tapped into deficits in people that made them feel like they could be rewarded if they did X, Y, or Z. So conditioning began to expand. And in dog training, for example, on a very encouraging note, the punishment dissolved and we began to use clicker training because the trainers realized that if you click and make a sound and pair it with the reward, then the dog's endorphins would trigger in and they'd feel good. So the clicker was used to make them feel good, and then you give them a reward for doing something right.
Instead of having your nose in your end and feeling shame. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So the whole field of conditioning is aimed at behavior modification. Getting somebody to do something you want them to do when they may want to do it or may not even know that they want to do it, but you manipulate them in a sense to do what you want them to do.
Mm-hmm.
Ra used the term to claim that we program people, condition people to live who they're not. Now, I've been a clinician for over 50 years. I can say 100%. I have not ever had a client who didn't know when they weren't being themselves. Now, they might have felt pain, but they were not unconscious of the fact that they were doing something that didn't feel like it was really aligned with them.
Right.
And most of my clients in a 50 years, very busy clinical psychology practice, all of my clients knew when they were doing things that were not right for them.
Mm-hmm.
They did it for different reasons. Now, what really happens when a baby is born is they're born into a culture. And that culture perceives the world in a certain way. We have a certain way of dressing. We have a certain way of talking. We have different ways of using language in different cultures. In fact, in some cultures, they don't even see certain shapes because there's no language for it. Mm-hmm. Or in other cultures, there are so many colors that it's, they have colors that in Western world we would never even know and perceive. So what Ra was really talking about was that we're to some degree molded by the Weltanschauung, the ambience of the culture we're born into. Mm-hmm. And it molds how we perceive the world. It doesn't condition it, but it's a predisposed approval of fitting in a certain way. And we were just talking about it in terms of the human design community. Mm-hmm. That because I talk about integrated charts and I use more charts than the traditional human design community, some people are very angry about it. Mm-hmm. Now, are they conditioned? I don't know. But I can tell you that if you limit yourself only to the human design chart, then you're using data that I have scientifically proved is not scientific. Mm-hmm. And it's a belief system, not a scientific system. Mm-hmm. So you have to decide from a psychological, sociological, anthropological stance where you want to be in the culture. It's a moral dilemma. Mm-hmm. More than a conditioned issue. Mm-hmm. The people who think a certain way and limit their thinking may be right for them to do that. Mm-hmm. That may be all that they want in their life and their growth.
Yeah.
And there are other people for whom that's not going to be right. So I don't use the word conditioned because it is not my task to condition anyone, nor to condition my kids mm-hmm. to a certain way of being. And so in the way I've worked with people, including children and parents of young children, is to teach them not to condition the children mm-hmm. in ways that are not healthy for them. Because I was using it in a very specific way.
Yeah.
We're all conditioned. We're conditioned to get up at a certain time and go to school, or we're conditioned, and it's not really conditioned. We go along with what the cultural custom is. And we could say no. And there are many people who do say no. Mm-hmm. But when you do not allow yourself permission to feel what you feel because you think you're defined as a certain type, then that's misinformation, not conditioning.
So do you like, say there's a transit, we would be can be potentially influenced by a transit, right? Influenced by someone.
But if you're looking at only the mental world,
right?
When I did calendars, roughly 2000, maybe 2014 to 17, I did these calendars, and I would look at the multidimensional, the noble energy maps, and I would see what each world was doing, and then what the composite did. Now, very often, we'd have a day that would be a manifesting generator day. But in the other worlds, a mental world manifesting generator day, but it could have been a reflector world in the lunar, or it could have been a projector day in the postnatal. So all combinations and permutations could happen. But when I had a calendar where every single chart was a manifesting generator chart, on days like that, often I could predict the stock market. And I did. I traded the stock market based on my calendars.
Right. I think you said you bought on manifesting generator days and sold on projector days or something like that. Yeah. That's a whole other topic. We can even return to that later. Okay.
But the point is that transits do influence. But honestly, I don't look at transits, because my internal perception of what's right for me overrides a transit.
Yeah, well, you're comfortable being yourself. That influence you still have a choice in how you show up and navigate the day
As we all do.
Right, based on your energy flow. Yeah, bunch of place to go here. The word triggered kept coming in my head. Like outside of human design, conditioned would almost be like some people would use the word like they've been triggered, I think. And I just feel like there's a correlation there. The other thing I wanted to say is I was listening to a Manly P. Hall lecture a month or two ago, and he spoke of conditioning. Like it was parroting, but in 1956, what Ra was saying later. And I definitely heard more than once that Ra was a big follower of Manly, like loved his work. So I mean, to me, some of that is just that bias that would have come through with, he had this knowledge and then he applied it based on things he heard from Manly P. Hall, right? So, I mean, that is, conditioning's not channeled. It's his interpretation or how he felt people needed to hear it. Which is, I'm with you. It's very disempowering. I don't want to be conditioned. I no longer accept being conditioned. And the other thing I wanted to say, I had a bit of an epiphany this week, but I realized that for me, I was in a lot of pain, and human design, I was looking for what was wrong with me at the time. And human design was telling me what was wrong with me. And now when I look at the integrated chart and I go through the channels book, it's more like, no, this is and that's the other word I'm looking for. Like, I don't know, it's defined sounds too structured too. So is it amplified? Is it dominant? Is it, because, you said before, we are all body.
No. When a channel is activated, it's a predisposed frequency. It's familiar to you. It feels more familiar and more manageable. It's not an unknown. Where we're undefined, all possibilities are options. You have choices, more choices than you have 6 choices. So the way I think of it is, I say, I look at the maps and I look, now you have it, now you don't. Now you feel it, now you don't. And the key, and I've said this before, when I was sitting with two ladies in my patio. One, and all I had was the 64 gate mental world and the 12 gate spiritual, 15 gate spiritual world. And one of them was defined sacral, who lost it when she slept. And the other was an undefined sacral and gained it when she slept. And I said to the one who had a sacral and lost it, I said, so you go to sleep thinking you know what your decision's going to be. And you wake up in the morning and say, what was I thinking?
Mhm.
She said, how did you know? And the other one, I said, and you go to sleep not knowing, and you wake up in the morning and you have your answer.
Mhm.
And to me, that said it all. Because it was not a conditioned field. It was that when she went to sleep, she gained a inner knowing early in life. Now we're talking that early in the first 3 months of life, the baby's personality is impacted by cosmic energy. And they're predisposed to respond in a certain way based on, for the most part, short-term transits.
Mhm.
And the long-term transits are generational. So if we were to be really specific in the design charts, we'd be looking at, well, which planet is it? And which sign is it? In which hexagram? And then which gate and which channel and what does it connect with? And then you read the meaning.
Mhm.
So in my reading of the energy maps, there's no formula.
Mhm.
Because a formula means you're reading a given description of something every single time in everybody's chart. But a gate in your chart, given what fed into it, is going to be very unique for you.
Mhm.
Because it affected you in early development. And, we don't even look at the mother's chart and how it influenced development during pregnancy. But we certainly can look at the family chart and look at what's influencing a baby in the first 3 months of their life.
Mhm. Hmm.
It's very interesting because the 2-day chart, the postnatal 2-day chart, is the critical period when when the colostrum turns to milk. And it's attachment. When the milk comes down is really when the mother and the baby are bonded as a unit.
Mhm.
And it would be very interesting to do a study to see and measure attachment behavior based on the transits for that person's chart and the mother's chart at the time. I have seen and read some charts where I had the mother and the daughter or the son, and I could tell from the way they interacted what the relationship was and what the mission was for
Mhm.
both of them. So sometimes in that chart, you can see karmic issues.
Right. So, and we actually talked about this a little bit before, I think. I think I remember the answer, but we'll talk about it again. So a friend had said, what if a mother doesn't breastfeed their baby? Would they not be? And like my answer was, well, oracally, that's still something like the mother's body's physiology would change anyway, whether she's breastfeeding or not, right? So
Right.
oracally, the imprinting is still occurring.
The
Uh,
imprinting occurs.
yeah.
The imprinting occurs because the hormones in the mother's body And I assume the hormones in the baby's body are connected. And, you know, I remember exactly the moment I bonded with my babies. Exactly.
Mhm.
And I was debating about it. When I had my son, I had only gained 12 pounds when I was pregnant. I was very careful. And I didn't have any anesthesia and I had no sedation. I had nothing. I wanted a completely natural childbirth.
Mm.
And my husband was an MD, and we were able to design that it would be the doctor, my husband, a nurse, and myself in the delivery room. That's it. So I was fully awake. While I was on the table, I said to my husband, let's do this again right away. This is great. And I did. I got pregnant with my daughter about 6 weeks later.
Wow.
They're 11 months apart, Irish twins. And I remember sitting in bed and the nurse bringing the baby to me and me looking at him and thinking, okay, this is my baby. Yeah, what am I supposed to feel for this person? This is my baby. You know, I'm supposed to feel this bond, this something. And my stomach was completely flat. You would not have known looking at me that I had been pregnant. So I'm looking at it. And then I got up and the nurse took him out of the room. And I went to wash my hands and I looked in the mirror and I crinkled my forehead. And Charles crinkled his forehead the same way I do.
Mm-hmm.
And as I saw myself just it almost imperceptibly raise my eyebrows like that. And I had seen him do it. I felt the hormones. It was like this unbelievable bonding, the likes of which I had never felt before. And if there had been a baby crying, I would have broken down the door to get to that baby if it was my baby. I mean, I felt those hormones like I've never felt anything before.
Mm.
And it was physiological. So that attachment behavior is physiological. And I remember when my daughter was born, same thing. I remember holding her and looking at her and the moment of attachment.
Hmm. And time frame wise, design hadn't come along, but your work was already in that space, right? Like you were already familiar with all the modalities, but at that point,
Okay.
design hadn't entered your orbit, right? Yeah.
No, by the time design entered my life in 1996, I was already trained in as a social scientist in all four worlds. I'd been trained by Masters and Johnson as a sex therapist. I was trained by Erica from Reichman at University of Chicago in hypnosis. And then I did a year advanced study in hypnosis. And I was president of that came later. Prior to 96, I was an astrologer, had studied astrology extensively, and had gotten all of Katie's secrets. I was studying the Kabbalistic Tree of Life in the 20-year study. I had been to England to study with Pamela Crane, to New Mexico to study. Joe Allen Jones let me into Thurza Escobar's private library to study. I had studied transcendental meditation. I had been to India and studied with Osho. I'd had multiple Kundalini experiences. I'd studied with psychics to learn how to get my psychic abilities under control. First to read and then to control.
Mm-hmm.
So I can take an object and tell you its history.
Hmm.
If I hold an object that's belonged to somebody, I can tell you about them. I don't do it. I don't want to do it. I don't generally look at people's auras. It's an intrusion in their privacy. But I can do it. So yes, all of the disciplines that were incorporated into human design. When I was in training as a Jungian, I studied the I Ching and I studied the Bhagavad Gita. And when I was studying consciousness, I studied all of the Eastern mysteries. If you want to study all of the Eastern mysteries and Western mysteries, David Allen Hulse has a book that's two books. One is the Eastern mysteries, one is the Western mysteries. And then there's one, The Keys to It All, which I think combined the two of them. I don't know how one person can know so much as he knows. But he put it all together. So Marvin and I, because when we met in India, I was already quite adept in many of the disciplines. And he was the first medical doctor at the Center for the Healing Arts. So he was already a healer and involved in alternative medicine. I've studied the machines that do vibrational analysis and homeopathic stuff. I don't remember the name of the one we had. We, in the early 1970s, we had a samadhi tank in our home, a flotation tank.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Wow. So we had that for a number of years. And yeah, we were consciousness junkies, reading all of the consciousness books. I've done the Course in Miracles several times. You know, I've actually studied Reiki and learned from Mrs. Takata. I studied thought field therapy, which became the emotional freedom technique, but I studied it with the originator of it, Roger Callahan. And I learned it before it was watered down.
What is that? Sorry, emotional, what'd you call it?
Freedom technique, tapping. You know tapping?
Oh, a little familiar tapping. That's
what that's the thought field therapy. It was originally developed by a psychologist to get rid of phobias. And there was a whole protocol. And then one of his students decided you could just do a general treatment and get the same effect. And he gave it away free. And it's now become the emotional freedom technique, not thought field therapy. But I studied thought field therapy with Roger, and then emotional freedom technique. I studied TAT, which was a different energetic healing. I studied Jin Shin Jitsu. I studied access bars consciousness. I've studied CBT, positive psychology, Enneagram, Imago relationship, Gottman relationship, discernment therapy. I'm a collaborative divorce mental health coach. I'm certified by the International Coach Federation. So I've studied it all.
Is of all those things, is there some that you've abandoned because it didn't hold up after time, or you incorporate all of it still?
None of them were the complete picture. So I could not get 100% behind any one of those because they didn't answer all of my clients' problems. And so the reason I kept searching is that no one system was the answer.
Mhm.
And the people who were hooked on one specific, including human design. I mean, part of the difficulty in human design is I was never just a human design person.
Mhm.
Did I do charts on all my patients? Absolutely. Did they know that I did the charts? Absolutely.
Mhm.
Did they know that I used many other disciplines? Like most of my clients are meditators. Most of them knew many of the techniques. And in fact, in the 5-day experience, I recommend many of them. Like for the emotional world, I recommend tapping or access bars or Sedona method. Lester Levinson was brilliant. Could you, would you, when? The release technique.
Hmm.
The problem with all those techniques is you have to do them.
Mhm. Yeah. Where do I want to go from here? So many places. You know what? Let's switch gears a bit. I want to talk about Reiki. I want to talk about moving energy. I want to talk about hypnosis and
Okay.
how they all kind of correlate. So for those listening, Wendy and I attended your Reiki first degree classes last week and got, I guess the term is initiated.
Mhm.
And that whole experience was a lot of very interesting. For me, because you were doing attunements in the webinars, and I recall you doing one about 2.5 months ago where you said, everyone's got healing hands for the next 48 hours. And at the time I was like, I don't know what that means, but cool. But like I could sense it. And part of my curiosity was I already kind of initiated and it was there? Because there's a bunch of things I want to say here. For one, years ago you wouldn't have caught me having this conversation at all. I was a non-believer, non-whatever. Um, the first instance of it, I was at a men's retreat 3 years ago, and it was a medicine retreat. So there's one day where everybody was on LSD, and it was intense, and it was a long 18 hours, and powerful. But there was this one fellow that just kept walking around, and he was just like for 10 hours. He was just like, I've got this ball of energy in my hand. And he was just like, and he was so sure of it that I remember, at least from me observing and witnessing, I was like, okay, he's pretty sure of that. And so that I was always curious. And then I don't know, I'm not gonna use the right term, but like I basically saw a couple people on a couple of YouTube videos where they talked about, feeling energy in your hands, but they also talked about the physical sensation, which can be very useful for hypnosis, right? You get that feeling of coldness because someone's touching your hands or whatever. And they had talked about like when you put your hands out, you stretch your fingers out because you're actually creating a bit of tension. So they're already kind of shaking. And if you're in that sort of hypnotic, relaxed state, you're going to like possibly confuse energy for your hands struggling a little. But I found that really powerful because it made me aware of it. Like all of a sudden it was like, because now I just open my hands and I can feel energy. And so I don't need that trick anymore, but that trick help me become aware of it. Um, and then I was at a hypnosis course in Toronto, and we were doing something called the frozen glove technique. And so
Right.
what it was you sort of like imagine you're sticking your hand in a snowbank, and your hand is now cold, and the hypnotist was lightly touching my hand and creating a sensation of coldness. And then the idea is he would guide me while I was in a trance to send it around my arm, and as it got there, it would double in power, and then down to my right foot, and it would double again. And it was the most eye-opening experience because I had a foot problem. So this left foot right here, the side of this foot, I don't know when I heard it because it wasn't like some incident or accident or anything, but about 12 years ago, all of a sudden the left side of my foot just hurt so bad. If I were to squeeze, like if someone were to squeeze it, it would almost be violence. Like it was so excruciatingly painful. And I went and I had every scan ever. I went to a foot specialist, and at the end of the day, this is probably 16 weeks and every device, and eventually the doctor just looked me in the eye and said, "We don't know what it is. You probably just have to take Advil for the rest of your life," which I recognize is a spell in of itself, right? And I was just like, and I remember not liking that answer. A, because I spent a great deal of time and found out nothing, but it made me very curious about if she can't find it with all this technology, I'm going to have to. And so it was around the same time that I was exploring plant medicine, and I had this metaphysical book. And so I opened up to foot metaphysics, and specifically left foot, because left was more feminine side, right was more masculine. And being in that plant medicine state, I was able to just sit and listen, read the paragraph, wait for something to appear in my mind's eye. And that night, about 30% of my foot pain went away. So it was like, wow, that was remarkable. But it wasn't all of it. So that was still, and then 2 years later, I'm at this hypnosis course, and this guy's walking me through this technique to send the frozen, because he said, "What would you like to fix?" I'm like, "This foot's still bugging me." So we go through it, we're sending that cold feeling to it. And I'm still struggling with, am I actually in a trance, right? Because when you're in a trance, like you're still there. And I remember him going like, "Okay, we're sending it to your right shoulder, to your left. And then, okay, now we're going to send it to your foot, and you're going to install the resources that you need to, make this foot pain go away." And he said, just, hold that energy there until you're satisfied that it's done its job. And I remember thinking, oh, this poor guy, I'm not going to make him wait too long. What I'll do is I'll just stall for 60 seconds. And then, because the answer was like, raise your finger to show you're done.
Right.
Now I know that it helped. But in my head, I'm like, I feel like I'm just doing this guy a service. Like, I don't want him to think he's not a hypnotist, right? So anyways, I come out and the pain is basically gone, like completely gone. So that was like very interesting. And I was very still skeptical. And that night I went to meet a friend. We were going to see a fellow at a drum clinic. And I'm in this Uber driving, and I'm sitting in the car, and all of a sudden, like this, imagine this is my foot. These 3 toes are like dancing inside my shoe. Like they basically hadn't moved in a decade. I had basically formed like a claw because it was protecting this side of my foot, that I had like contorted my foot and screwed up my gait and everything. So here I'm in this car, my toes are moving, and that's just really weird. Like they're moving by themselves. I'm not asking them to move. And then we go for a walk, and now my hip hurts, my back hurts, and it was because my whole stride had been changing. Like all of a sudden, I was walking properly for the first time in probably 12 years. That was like unbelievable. And like for 2, 3 days, I had pain kind of everywhere as I adjusted, and then it was pretty much gone. Still took a year in my own house, walking down the stairs in my house. I would always favor that left foot. And I had to like remind myself, like, it doesn't hurt. It's okay. You don't have to do this. But it was like a habit. It was stuck in me. So it was a hugely powerful thing. Well, this week, I've been doing the Reiki techniques in various places. And last night I was doing a meditation, and I just was like, started, feeling the energy in my hands, and then I just was sending it around my body. And it was just so powerful. I could feel it, I could sense it. It's amazing. That's all I want to say, really. But I had to go through all these experiences to even just accept, or sort entertain it, hadn't experienced anything like that.
To convince yourself that energy is real.
Sorry?
To convince yourself that energy is real.
Yeah. I mean, I hadn't been convinced until then. And like now,
I think we all need to do our own experiment.
Yeah.
I think I've mentioned my gardenia experiment, haven't I?
No? Possibly. Tell me.
When in 1970, I started having big experiences in 1974. And it was when at the same time, I opened my office in Chicago on Michigan Avenue. And next to my chair was a gardenia plant. And the gardenia plant would bud, and the buds would turn black and they'd fall off. But I never got flowers. And In 1976, I was commuting between Chicago and California because the energy person I was studying with was in California. And I was told that he was doing with his hands what I could see with my eyes.
Mhm.
So his name was Joy. So I was going back and forth, and I was also promoting my book on divorce, and I had some appearances in California. So anyhow, I didn't know that the energy was really real. I wasn't convinced. So I thought, okay, if this stuff really works, then if I keep my hand over my gardenia plant while I'm in session with people, which is a lot of hours a week, then it should bud. If this energy stuff really works, it's going to bud and it's going to blossom.
Mhm.
The day I was due to leave for my next trip to California, I got a blossom.
Hmm.
That bud opened and I had a beautiful gardenia. So I knew energy was real.
Hmm.
Made it bloom. And I've seen healings, you know.
Well, let's talk about those things, because I think, again, old me, I need to hear the stories, and others do too. Like, what have you seen? Like, if yeah, I just, yeah, what have you seen? Let's just go with
Well, I've seen people's breaks heal, including my own.
right.
I actually went to the physical therapist this morning because I hurt my knee. And I went to the orthopedist and he said, it's really just inflammation. It'll get better, but here's, a chit for the physical therapy if you want it. So I said to Marvin, last weekend, I said, I think I'm going to heal. I don't know that I want to go to physical therapy. I think I'll just heal it. And so I had an appointment set up and I decided to keep it, but I healed it. So I went this morning and he said to me, oh, I remember when you broke your arm. You healed it in record time. He said it was amazing because I broke my upper arm here in 3 places, it was difficult because I had broken my clavicle a number of years before and it should have had surgery and never did. So it's not exactly healed in alignment, which made this break more difficult. But the orthopedist told Marvin when he saw him recently that I healed it in record time. What did I do? And then the physical therapist this morning said the same thing to me.
Mm.
And my knee is completely healed. He did all the evaluations, which I wanted him to do. And he said, you don't need physical therapy. You healed it.
Nice. Now, you did Reiki on yourself. Is it as powerful as if Marvin had done it for you? I mean, I guess some Reiki is just like there's not.
It's equally powerful if I do it on one person or 100 people.
Right. No, sorry.
I do it on everybody who works with me at night, every night.
Where do I want to go? So, as a Reiki practitioner, like, I guess technically I'm a first degree Reiki practitioner.
First degree Reiki practitioner. I have your certificate here to mail.
Okay.
We had rain all week. I have to get to a post office maybe tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. So, just because it popped in my head, here at where I'm at my office in this place called Funky Town, and when we got insurance, the insurer didn't seem to care what we were doing, so long as we had uh, waivers and stuff for yoga and that kind of thing. and didn't really care what we were doing. But he kept insisting, if you're doing Reiki, you need to let us know. And I thought that, like, this is 6 months ago, so at the time it was just interesting. I didn't really inquire, but he did ask like 3 times. And I just thought, considering, with Reiki, you're not like bending someone backwards and potentially going to hurt their back. You're literally holding
No,
space.
you're touching someone.
Mm.
Yoga, you're not touching people usually.
Yeah, unless I guess you're helping someone with an adjustment. But yeah, but like the physical, it really is just light touch. Yeah, that just seems strange that was something that they really like. I'll have to.
So when I studied Reiki, 1977, June, there were 3 Reiki masters in the West. And nobody believed it. And now it's covered by Medicare.
Oh, is it really? I
Yes.
wonder if it's the same in Canada.
And they do it in hospitals. So, and unfortunately, a lot of people are not doing real Reiki anymore.
Right. And
so, you can also get a minister's license. Ministers can touch people. Doctors can touch people. Healers can touch people. Masseuses can touch people. But, that's really what the issue is. You're touching somebody and they could accuse you of something, or who knows. You can make promises that aren't kept.
Yeah. I mean, that's a whole interesting conversation there. Like, how do you market Reiki other than to say, this is what I've done, this is what I'm interested in doing, would you like to come? But I mean, I can't make any promises because ultimately receiving the energy, there needs to be an acceptance or an intention to receive it too.
I'll tell you an interesting story about that.
Sure.
I moved to California. One of my first patients was a guy who was on disability because he had fallen off a ladder or something and hurt his back on his job. So he had disability. And he'd been on disability a very long time. And I started working with him, and I did a past life regression, and I did Reiki. And after a session in which we got in touch with a past life in the eruption of a big volcanic eruption, his back pain was gone, completely gone. And he came in the next week and his back pain was gone. And 2 weeks later, he came in and his back pain was back. And I said to him, what happened? And he looked me straight in the eye and he said, I want to keep my spa. He wanted to be on disability.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he wanted to be on disability because he got a spa.
You got a spa.
They paid for the spa.
Hmm.
And it was such a lesson to me of exactly what you're talking about. You are not going to be healed unless you accept the healing.
Definitely.
You're not going to manifest your potential unless you believe you can. You're not going to manifest your goals unless you know what they are. The mental world and emotional reactivity can dismantle healing.
Definitely. Yeah, on that. So when I was on this hypnosis course, the main fellow there, Mike, spoke. He said basically that smoking is one of the hardest ones to do because it's both a physical.
2 days. 2
Yeah.
days. There's a protocol that does, you quit smoking in 2 days.
Right. Well, and yeah, he echoed
One
that
of
as
the easiest things to hypnotize.
Yeah, he was speaking of it needed 2 appointments, I guess for that protocol, and that it was because some smokers didn't actually want to quit. They wanted to blame the hypnotist. Like, I've tried everything, even the hypnotist couldn't do it, right? So it's kind of the same thing, right? You don't want to quit smoking, but your will
Not
to smoke
everybody
is
is hypnotizable.
right. Is that I've heard that before. Is that a percentage of population? Is it something to do with the person's design, or is it more of a
I don't know.
hmm,
I don't know. My daughter is very hypnotizable. It's her specialty. You've spoken to her.
mhm.
Um, she's phenomenal at it. She loves it. Uh, I'm not hypnotizable.
Hmm.
Um, and I do it. But um, I do it for people. I've done hypnosis as the only anesthesia in surgery for somebody, and it works. But I'm not very hypnotizable.
Hmm.
Why? I don't know.
I definitely recognize now that I was very hypnotizable and I was being hypnotized even without, my okay, right? Like NLP being used in a sales kind of situation and stuff. I recognize now, looking back, and certain people that would just, they do the nod with you, they'd like, you want to buy that car, right? Yeah, and that car is going to be, and I until I had no idea. So
But
yeah.
you do now.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I see it and I point it out to people when I see it happening too, you know. Um, yeah. Interesting. Um, what would you like to talk about? Do you have any questions for me?
We've been working together for what, 2 months, 3 months?
I think it's been longer than that. I think it's almost been 5. Yeah.
What changes do you notice in yourself since we've worked together?
A ton. Um, and accelerating the last couple of weeks. The channels book, I think I mentioned this last time we spoke, has been huge. And part of that has been I even heard Marvin mention it once too. Like when something in design makes sense, it kind of clicks in and it kind of you sort of feel it at a cellular level. I had already been feeling that even before I met you with certain parts of design. There was parts of it that clicked into place. But to do a second pass at it with the channels book, to read the channels that I was already aware of from a new context, and then the companion suggestions. You have been talking about Tai Chi Gong, and so I'd already earmarked it and connected with Heather, and then damn it, there it is in the book 10 times for me. Like this is something to pay attention to, and so I am, and it's amazing, and she's amazing, and so I'm just grateful for that, and so there's that, and then going to the channels and trying to make sense of it in the worlds. That was pretty profound because it was kind of like getting a new set of um, ninja skills or something added to my Batman tool belt. Like all of a sudden I was like, oh wow, that as I read it, I was like, that absolutely resonates for me. But until I had allowed myself to, adjust my way of thinking, we were talking about human design and the world that Ra has painted. It's where am I going with that? Other than to say, I'm grateful for my style, which is to just try a little bit of everything everywhere. My human design journey was to get a dozen readings over the last 3 years. I just got more out of someone, a different filter, a different lens, instead of just one reading, and it just didn't work for me. So yeah, it's like it's a fresh start, clean slate, and I feel it's much more empowering. And so it's the language, as I say, even this week has been. I'm right there with you. Conditioning is not a word I plan on using. It's it is influence, or, there's a bunch of, now and I were talking about this morning, but maybe almost need like a one pager, like, terms that you used to hear, replace them with this, a little mini dictionary swap, deconditioned from human design. So,
Well, I did do that, actually. I did it for the body graph program. I wrote a whole human design side for Gitas.
okay.
And he wanted it, so for example, if what I did is for couples, I wrote all the different types and the combinations of types. If a manifesting generator is interacting with a projector, how does that affect them? I know type is real.
Mhm.
Where I think the issue comes in its value is when some of the things that are formulaically used and that did not hold up scientifically, they can disempower people.
Mhm. Yeah, because it ends up creating a whole bunch of new labels, is kind of what was going on as well. Like a whole bunch of like, oh, that's what's wrong with me. This is why I'm stuck here. This is why I'm stuck there, and I'm not stuck anywhere. So, yeah,
No, we definitely are not stuck anywhere.
Yeah. So yeah, so let's talk about type for a second then, because I recall you saying Ra said, I'm going to teach 4 types, you teach 5. And this seems to be around the same time that a lot of people may have broken from Ra, I guess, because I don't think, like, Chaitan, as far as I know, is definitely teaches 5, and Karen Curry Parker. So it's almost like, I don't know the exact timing of how many years, but that seems to be like a significant point where people moved on and created their own practices, did their own research, all that. And then it was kind of Ra hanging
What happened was Ra had a major falling out with Zeno and Chaitanya, which is why he came to me. But then he backtracked a bit because that's the way he was. Eventually he broke with them. And we were going to design programs for professionals, and Ron needed to go back to Ibiza or he would have been deported, truth be told. His daughter was deported. He was not on a work visa and he was working. So, anyhow, so he needed to go back to Ibiza. And in 2000, it was in 2000 that I was supposed to go to Ibiza to present the scientific data. And I backed out of it because my daughter almost died.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't leave. I mean, I couldn't leave her at that point. So Rod really didn't want me to do anything. He wanted complete control. And he got very angry that I expanded the system, but he was beginning to admit that it was worth doing. He wanted to teach the science, and I refused to release things that could be misinterpreted. In fact, I found a letter that I had written to one of the human design people saying, please don't quote my science incorrectly. And if you do quote it and quote it correctly, please give me credit for having done the research. Because to this day, my research is being quoted erroneously.
Mm-hmm.
So when I speak to Ra, he was intrigued to get my scientific input, but not when it didn't go along with the story.
Mm-hmm. That he was already telling too, basically. So there was some, I guess, ego.
He was already what?
The story that he was already telling. So there's sort of ego.
Well, it was originally he and Zeno and Chaitanya and Jurgen, I believe, came up with 4 types. To do or to wait was the first, and how many splits there were. And Chaitanya wrote an article about that recently, by the way. So Ra began to teach manifestor, generator, and a subset of the generator was manifesting generator. So he had 5 types. I wouldn't have known to test them. But he didn't allocate it as its own independent type. So what my research found was that there were 5 actually statistically independent types. When I ran the tests to see significance, all 5 types were independent of each other. Mm-hmm. And so it was when I said that to Ra, how can you tell people there were 4 when there were 5? And his answer was, I'm an ego manifester. I can't go back on what I said. It wouldn't look good.
Yeah, and it seems like he did talk about manifesting generators a bit later. So I don't know if he changed.
Well, he was talking about them. He just didn't label them as their own type.
Yeah, it's sort of like a subtype, but it's kind of the word. Subtype, yeah. Interesting.
But the real break with Ra came because he really wanted me to stay completely separate from human design. And he didn't want me involved in it at all. And he didn't want to pay his bills.
So he used you as a consultant and then didn't even want to, yeah.
We were 50-50 business partners in a general partnership, and he wasn't paying half the expenses. So I got tired of paying 100% of the expenses and not being able to do my work, because anytime I wanted to teach something or write something, he would not want me to do it because it would interfere with what he was doing. So that's not being a team.
Yeah.
Or a partner. And I hope, and my intention is that Noble Sciences will be different, that I'm in the process of looking for people who will be part of a team and who will do research with integrity and honor the integrity of the science, and really honor the integrity of the soul. Because when we talk about the mental world and leave out the other worlds, we leave out the soul. And if we leave out the soul, we leave out the most precious part that everybody feels about themselves. So how could we do that? I can't do that.
Well, does the soul appear in the body graph? You talk about these crystals of consciousness, and I don't know enough to really speak intelligently to any of that, or even accurately.
Yeah, it appears in the lunar design.
Okay.
It appears in the fact that you have 4 bodies. It appears in the fact that the timing of the astrology and of the human design body graph is validating the 4 worlds. And that as a human being, over that period of time, we can actually see how the cosmos influences the individual. Actually, David Wilcock last Sunday David does these very long, very long recordings. He did a 4-hour recording, and it took him 2 hours and 30 minutes to get to the point, which was that crop circles appeared around the time of the assassination attempt, and that
sorry, which attempt?
The assassination attempt on Trump.
Oh, the ear. There was crop circles up here. Okay.
It's also biblical. So the crop circles appeared in conjunction with that, and they're a circle with a square. And there's a astronomer who did quite a bit of research, and David quoted all the research, and he was giving the math and the ratios of the Earth to the moon to the sun, and the diameters and the radius and how they track. And then when you reduce the numerology, you have the human. And I cannot do it justice, but 2 hours and 30 minutes into David Wilcox last Sunday YouTube video, he got into all of the geometry, and his conclusion, when you come and bring it into the human body and the head and the body and all, it's perfect geometry. And his conclusion was only God could have created this. There is no way in hell this is a human creation for all of this cosmic numerology being exact. And it's exact to the four worlds. It's exact to the tree of life.
So what does that signify to you right now? It's just an interesting timing anecdote?
It validates the four world numerology. I mean, the geometry of it. It validates the calculations. It validates that we're one universe, one people, one being, and that we're all connected, and that we're here with a divine purpose and a divine mission. And each of us needs to know what that is for ourselves. We can see it to some degree in the body graph if you use the right parameters.
Yeah. Well, looking at the time, that's something I definitely want to talk about at some point, but can we talk about that now, or is that for another day?
Now let's leave it another day because I'm going to have to go. I don't know what the plans are for tonight.
Okay.
And it's been a long day. I've been on camera for 4 hours.
Okay, well, I'll give you a reprieve then.
Actually, in the hour before the 5-day experience, I had 2 sessions, so I was on for another hour.
Oh, wow.
But it's fun. It'll be fun. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, why don't we wrap it there? I hope you have a great weekend. I'll probably ping you over the weekend and catch up.
Yep. And if Sean, for your listeners, if people do want to sign up for the classes, either email me or let us know that you're interested. And if I need to add another class, I will add another class rather than adding people to the current class.
Yeah, it probably makes sense to start building a wait list for sure, and then just so that, yeah, I'm sure you'll have.
I need to keep my classes personal.
Yeah, no, I'm fine. Cool. All right, I need to go meditate and have a nap.
Please do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, listeners.
Have a great